Madam President, Hilary Louise de Jassé, who had long been the president's closest ally and friend on top of being her chief of staff, spoke quickly and quietly. "You're a fool. You need to take a second and think through what you're saying." President Edwards barely heard her. Instead, the exhausted woman stared vacantly up at the shattered moon. Its pieces bathed her city with moonlight. Pashenko surrendered. She didn't understand how it had happened. He gave up, threw down his arms. He disobeyed his orders. The battle in the Pacific had lasted only 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were some of the fiercest in human history. If any battle was ever fought with more courage and valor, it certainly wasn't a battle that Julia had ever heard of. Then it had all ended. The admiral had ordered his fleet to stand down after the alien. Gave his speech across every screen in the world. To his superiors, he had offered no explanation. Instead, the president had watched as his flagship, the USS Pride, had ventured forth from the fleet. The alien vessel turned to meet it. The video feed from the satellites was so clear that the president could see the flag that hung off the Pride's stern. To the president, it seemed to hang limp and lifeless. She understood exactly how it felt. Julia watched as they drew close to one another. The alien craft dwarfed her nation's mightiest vessels. Eventually, the Pride had disappeared directly underneath the alien craft. By that point, the Secretary of Defense was foaming at the mouth. The string of profanities stretched long and wide as they emanated unceasingly from his lips. "Coward, traitor, fiend," John Burl spat. His arms flailed through the air with each exclamation. His round face was red with impotent rage. Julia had only watched silently, wondering to herself. The satellite feed reflected off her emerald-colored eyes. Questions danced through her mind. "Pashenko, what are you playing at?" In other circumstances, she would have gone on the record disavowing the Ukrainian. But seeing as the world was ending around her, that would have to wait for another time. Now her advisors were explaining to her that she was not safe here. The alien vessel over the west coast had begun moving slowly inland. Coming for me, Julia knew. She had felt chills when the alien, this Commander Essel, spoke her name. Part of her mind had shouted out, "Why me? I was only doing my job." That didn't matter now, either. The ultimatum had been given. The warship was moving closer every minute. She could feel it approaching like the icy hands of death wrapping around her neck. Soon, they would be gripping too tight to breath. The remaining White House staff had been mysteriously disappearing since the alien leader, a Gran Essel, had made his insane demands. The Secretary of Defense excused himself on the promise that he needed to make preparations for some unspoken contingency. The president, still in shock, had let him leave without a word. Now she felt almost completely alone. Certainly, Hilary would stay by her side, but this was a deeper sort of loneliness. The gnawing emptiness of total and complete hopelessness. For the second time that day, Julia found herself on the White House balcony. Above her the stars twinkled brightly, caring little for the affairs of mankind. It was strange to know that things were so different now, and yet the city looked much the same as it always had. It was the moon that told the real story. Its fragments continued the orbit that the once mighty sphere had started. The pieces were as broken as mankind below them. He wants to subject the entire human race. Julia's mind refused to grow quiet. All 8 billion of us, with 5 ships and 1,000 or so of his comrades that might be hiding within them. It was impossible. He would have a better chance at making a river run backwards. Then again, Julia thought, her face pointing up towards the night sky. It wouldn't be the craziest thing that I've seen today. "Ma'am," Hilary said, reaching out with her right hand. "Julia." She placed her well-groomed fingers on the president's arm. "You need to get out of here." The president let out a helpless chuckle and looked over at her aide. "Hilary," she said, eyes glimmering, "I think my husband must hate me by now." "What?" Her chief of staff furrowed her brow in confusion. When I took this job, I promised him that when it was over, he'd never have to put aside another day of his life to help me with mine. She paused a few seconds. It's beginning to look a lot like I lied. The president stared again out at the city skyline. Across the green of the National Mall, the Washington Monument pierced the sky. It had been built during a civil war that nearly tore the country apart. The monument represented the freedom and liberty that those who built it believed in strongly enough to die to keep the nation together. Julia wondered what they would think of her. The woman who lost the war, the greatest war, in a single day. The clock had not yet struck midnight, and the president was already certain that the world was beyond saving. Tonight will be the last night that monument stands, she thought. Tonight will be the last night that the country that built it exists. Ma'am, Hillary replied, seeking the right words. It isn't your fault that this has happened. It isn't anyone's fault except those alien monsters. You've done what you could. No one can say otherwise. Now isn't the time for this, though. They are coming here for you. Julia looked at her aide. The determination in the chief of staff's eyes bolstered something inside of her. You are the president of the United States, Hillary continued. If you go down, we all do. She paused for a few moments before adding, angrily, I will serve no king. Julia let out a long sigh. She looked into her aide's eyes, seeking the resolve within them. Finally, she turned and looked back out across the Washington skyline. The Lincoln and Jefferson memorials spoke out to her, across distance and time. I will serve no king, Julia reflected. This isn't the first time those words have been spoken. Fine, she said. Pack a bag for me, call for Marine 1 to take me to Andrews Air Force Base, and then tell anyone that's still here to get as far away as they can. Hillary nodded and left quickly on her mission. Julia exhaled again. She felt ancient. How could all of this have happened? Yesterday the world had been fine. Today it was ending. Too abrupt to be real, too hopeless to be a dream. All there was to do was wait for the closing curtain. Yesterday, her greatest foe had been the Speaker of the House. He was a short, pudgy man with the self-assured air of a Spartan warrior. Yesterday, she had thought him to be a tough and worthy adversary. The definition of those words had changed a lot in these last few hours. James, she spoke out into the darkness. I've changed my mind, honey. The night offered no response apart from a chilling breeze from the north. Autumn was almost over. Soon, a merciless winter would descend upon them. She was not prepared. I'm ready to have children. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.